What's up, YouTube? I know, it's been a long time. Had to do it again. I know some of you missed it. I've actually had people say, whatever happened to your intro? So anyway, this video is going to be something I've seen mentioned online quite a number of times from various Pentax shooters that are curious about the K-3 Mark III. However, they're still looking for more information. So this is going to be an image quality comparison between the Pentax K3 versus the Pentax K3 Mark III. Now, we're going to get into high ISO, all that stuff, rendering colors and all that goodness. So what I have set up, let me just quickly show you here, is very simple. Got my tripod here, got a light stand here, and I'm going to mount one of the cameras here, other camera here, hopefully. And we're just going to take a picture of this over here. So it's just some package boxes, a little flashlight that's red, multi-tool thing here that's a different shade of red, because we're all pretty much on the same consensus that Pentax red rendering, yeah, that seems to be a topic of discussion in regards to high ISO. So I wanted to have two different shades of red. Got some orange, some black box, just to show, so noise will show up more easily within the black area. And then you've got the white lettering, and then over here you've got black lettering, the black flash picture here, some orange lettering here, and the rest of the box is white. So it should be enough of a variation in regards to the colors and everything to really showcase the actual image quality between these two cameras. So let's just get right to it. Okay, and I'll be using the Pentax DA50 1.8 set at f4, because that's when the lens is the absolute sharpest. We're going to start off with the K3 Mark I, and I'm going to use a remote timer, and I'm going to have both cameras on the same settings. So spot focusing, spot metering, which I've actually metered the white box there so that we have the brightest point, and so that's where the exposure is going to be dead set even, and we're just going to fire off some shots and go from there. Okay, so now that I'm finished running the image capturing portion of the video, I didn't want to bore you guys with taking shot after shot. There was something that I did experience using the K3 Mark III and the DA50 1.8 lens. Yeah, the results weren't that fantastic. At first I thought it was the autofocus fine adjustment that was off, so I went through the whole gamut of -10 all the way up to +10. Didn't make a difference. I used electronic shutter, didn't make a difference. I used live view, no difference. It just looked soft for some strange reason. My guess is that, seeing as the DA50 1.8 is an older lens, I think the camera is actually out-resolving the lens itself, which I did not see coming. But in regards to the color rendition and the noise floor, things like that, we can still do this comparison. So let's just get right to it. Okay, so on the left side here is the K3 pictures, and on the right side are the K3 Mark III pictures. Now, as I zoom in, you'll see what I was talking about here. Here's the K3 Mark I, and it's fairly sharp. And let's zoom in here. These are slightly off, just from me running through all the different tests and everything. So I'll try to zoom these in as even as possible. So here, it's actually slightly comparable. It's not too bad. If I go in 100% though, you'll notice here looks slightly blurred, just very slightly, and the lettering here is a little blurred as well. But overall, it's not too bad. If I go to 200 on here, what was this, 300, 200, yeah, you'll see it's not quite as sharp on the K3 Mark III as it is on the K3 Mark I. But if I go back to keep both of these almost as equally zoomed as possible, along here where camera is written, it is slightly more blurred than here. So the K3 does seem to be sharper. Now let's just take a look at this tool here. Here you can see a noticeable difference. However, where the focus plane is pretty consistent if you're looking at the bottom of the table here. So you've got the focus area here, focus area here. And as I said, I mean, I tried everything. But moving on, actually let's just recenter these here. And along here you'll see the Godox orange. Let's go to the Godox orange here. So the K3 Mark III, this seems to be more on the orange side, and especially this flashlight here. It's kind of, well, it's red-ish. It's sort of more of a orangey red. You can see it is more orange on the K3 Mark III rendition. Now let's go to ISO 200. Let's wait for that to load. Wait for this one to load. Okay, so ISO 200. And still, not bad. Not bad. I mean, there isn't really any noise or anything. You know, still pretty clean images, right? Still pretty clean. But here you can definitely see blur. Yeah, I tried over and over, but you can definitely see blur along here. So it looks like the other tests from like DP Review and whatnot, they were correct. There is something going on in regards to, I don't know, I guess the mirror itself when it's moving around, but something is causing that slight blur. All right, let's go to 100 here. So this is ISO 400 at 1/10 of a second. And that was something else I noticed that was different as well, is the actual exposure setting. So ISO 400, 1/15 of a second in order to get the same exposure. Remember, I was using spot. I metered for the white box here for even exposure, and you'll see that the lighting, like it was in tungsten light, you know, but yeah, just the exposuring, the way it's metering is the two cameras are not the same. I mean, these are completely different. 1/15 of a second, 1/10 of a second to get the exact same exposure. So it's interesting. It's interesting. At least I think it's interesting. But anyway, okay, so let's zoom out a bit here. And let's go, actually, let's go here because this should be where most of the noise starts showing up. Let's bring this over. So far, still pretty even. No, you can see there's, I would say it's fairly even, you know, at ISO 400. So now let's go to ISO 800. And this is where we should start seeing some differences here. Let's just double check, make sure. Yep, ISO 800, 1/30th of a second. ISO 800, 1/20th of a second. So yeah, again, the exposure, the way it's exposing the two cameras metering is totally different. But regardless, let's take a look here. And what we find is now you can start seeing more noise in the K3 Mark I image. Let's zoom in here. And we've got less noise in the K3 Mark III image. Yeah, so I guess, you know, obviously the processing is different, but still, it still appears that the K3 Mark I is actually getting a sharper image than the K3 Mark III using that DA50 1.8 lens. which I'm still very surprised by that. Yeah, very, very strange. But anyway, okay, so let's go across to the black box. And on the black, doesn't seem to be too bad. Detail is there. You can still see the screw. The orange for Godox is much more pronounced on the K3 Mark III. Like it's almost like this is lit up or highlighted compared to the K3 Mark I. It's more subdued. But overall, okay, so on the back wall here, you can see some noise. And you don't nearly see as much noise on the back wall in the K3 Mark III image. So now let's go to 1600 ISO and see what happens. So now at 1600 ISO, let's see if there is any. Okay, now you can really start seeing some noise here. And let's go on the K3 Mark III. Yeah, much more controlled. Now remember, these are complete DNGs. Complete and utter DNGs. I did not shoot these as JPEGs. What I'm showing are not JPEGs. You can easily see that they are all DNGs, DNG. No conversions were done. This is straight DNG from the card. So now you can actually notice that this is starting to fall off a bit. There's less detail showing up here. But in regards to noise, the K3 Mark III, this is where it starts to really pull ahead. And even looking at the display box here, where the screen is, this has noise everywhere. And this is a lot cleaner. Yeah, I just can't get over, like, the slower shutter speeds. I'm just very surprised. Like, the sharpness just really was lacking. It's odd. And again, the orange is more pronounced on the K3 Mark III, but it is still holding a much cleaner image compared to the K3 Mark III. So now, what was that? That was 800? Was that 800? I can't even keep track right now. All right, let's see. Where are we at now? Okay, that was ISO 1600. So now we're at ISO 3200. So at ISO 3200, let's just keep both of these the same. And the exposures, again, completely different. On the K3 Mark I was 1/125th of a second. On the K3 Mark III was 1/90th of a second. So again, totally different exposures. And let's take a look at the noise here. Now you can really start to see some pronounced noise here at 3200 ISO on the K3 Mark I image. And let's take a look at the K3 Mark III. K3 Mark III image, much cleaner. You can see some noise on the back wall here, just in my grayish wall area, but it's not nearly as pronounced. And the actual box for the Godox trigger is a much cleaner image than what's showing on the K3 Mark I. And again, even the white, you can see speckles everywhere. This is much cleaner. So now let's go to ISO 6400. And the K3 Mark I shot at 1/250th of a second, and the K3 Mark III was 1/180th of a second. So again, completely different exposures. This is really, yeah, the metering's completely different on each of these cameras, and I had everything set up exactly the same. I really was not expecting this kind of outcome, but it is what it is. And now you can really start seeing some noise here. Let's take a look at the K3 Mark III image here once my software catches up. If you're going to zoom at all. There we go. Okay, so on the K3 Mark III image, again, it is much cleaner. It is still doing that orange tinge for reds. Let's see how pronounced the orange is on the K3 Mark III image. It's still pretty much the same. It's more vibrant on the orange side. However, now when we look at the white, there's a lot of speckles in there. And with noise, it's much easier to see noise, in a lower exposed area like blacks and shadows. So having all these speckles in the white, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, again, this is 6400 ISO on the K3 Mark I and 6400 ISO on the K3 Mark III. The K3 Mark III now is by far pulling away, no questions asked. No questions asked whatsoever. It is a much, much, much cleaner image. Now let's go to the next one. 12,800 ISO. And 12,800 ISO on the K3 Mark III. So we've got 1/500th of a second for the K3 Mark I and 1/350th of a second for the K3 Mark III. Again, totally different exposure. Yeah, it's weird. The metering's completely and utterly different on these two cameras. Same lens, same aperture, just totally different exposures. So now we're starting to get some grain in the K3 Mark III image. However, it's nothing in comparison to the K3 Mark I image. But the K3 Mark I image looks like it is still retaining some detail. However, along here it's a bit splotchy. Along the ring here does look a bit sharper. Just a tad sharper. There's more contrast definition. Now on the box itself, showing the trigger. Let's just get this moved over here. The K3 Mark I image is a lot noisier, and it seems to be that there's now less detail. The splotches are taking away from the fine lettering on the font and everything along the display, whereas the K3 Mark III image is much, much cleaner. It's retaining more detail, all the little fine contrast areas. There's no noise along this area here compared to the K3 Mark I. And again, the white box, much, much, much cleaner on the K3 Mark I. So I mean, I knew the K3 Mark III, it's a much cleaner image on the K3 Mark III. And with that said, I knew the K3 Mark III would have better, higher ISO capability. I just wasn't expecting it to be this drastic a difference. So they have really refined the accelerator chip, or so it's not really losing detail. It is retaining detail. It's literally just reprocessing the image itself. It's analyzing the entire thing. It's taking out noise where needed, but it's still keeping that fine detail. So, everybody who complained about, it's taking away detail and it's eating stars and eating my waffle breakfast and all this other stuff, I don't see that actually being the case. Except for the fact that, the camera is clearly out-resolving the DA50 1.8 lens, unfortunately. All right, so let's go on to 25,600 and see how that turns out. Okay, so 25,600 ISO. Here we go. Let's take a look at these two images. All right, so you can't even make it you can barely see B, C. I mean, the detail's just gone. It's gone. It's just splotches all over the place on the K3 Mark I. It's gone. You can't even make out where the screw, the little screw was. And on the K3 Mark III image, you can still make out where that screw actually is. You can make out the port here, the USB port here. You can clearly see that this is a Bluetooth symbol. It's kind of hard to tell on this one. Can barely make out the P here. You can't even read CBA on this. You can barely read B. But even just the settings themselves, you can't really make out. You can't even make out that this is a battery meter. but you can make it out here. So yeah, the K3 Mark III does actually retain detail. Yes, there is some noise reduction being applied. However, overall, it is still retaining detail. It's retaining a lot of detail. And now this orange is starting to turn red on the K3 Mark I versus it maintaining the orange on the K3 Mark III. Right? You know, you're looking at the images, right? I don't know what else to say. The detail is just clearly there. There's less noise. The detail's still there. The color rendition is still pretty much what it was down at the lower ISOs. I mean, you can see some splotchiness here, some color noise, luminance noise, but overall, I mean, it's just a much, much cleaner image on the K3 Mark III. And let's go one more. 50, I can't even remember now, 51,200. So for social media, yeah, if you're doing super tiny images, I mean, it would look okay. I mean, it would still look okay. You'd see some noise here, but it would be okay. However, once you zoom in, if you want to pixel peep, I mean, this is horrid. Absolutely horrible. Wow. And again, you can still clearly read out this display here for the most part. It's getting a little difficult to read. Okay, so now you can't see that battery meter. But again, this is at 51,200 ISO. And now let's take a look at the orange color here. So, yep, it's becoming a lot splotchier along here. You can't even make any of the definition or the lines that were along the barrel of the flashlight there. You can still see a little bit of it here, very, very slightly. A lot of this could be cleaned up in post. However, if we go over to the white box area, this is a much cleaner image. You can tell this is CFN. Just make out the CFN on here. You know that this is the flash sync thing. It's a bit hard to make out. You've got your wireless symbol here. It's hard to make it out on the K3 Mark I. And you can't even tell that this is millimeter or zoom, but you can just barely read it on here. So it is still retaining more detail. I mean, yes, there is noise reduction happening, but it's also maintaining more detail. And the histograms are interesting too, because if you look at the histogram on the K3 Mark I, the red channel is really up there. But then if you look at the red channel on the K3 Mark III, it's more in the center, right? So, I mean, yeah, the way it's interpreting the images that it's seeing, it's just completely and utterly different. Now, obviously, I couldn't go any higher than 51,200 on the K3 Mark I. Right? So, yeah, I mean, so let's actually take a look. So let's see here. That's 52. So let's go down 25,600. And let's actually see if we can find a comparison of balance here. So 51,000, or sorry, what was this? 25,600. Okay, so 25,600 ISO on the K3 Mark I. And let's see here. Nope. There's still. Okay, nope. I gotta go back one. Let's go back one. So let's see here. 12,800. Let's see if that's actually 12,800. Maybe a little tad, just over 12,800 ISO on the K3 Mark I would be equivalent to 51,200 ISO on the K3 Mark III. For example, if I go back one here to 25,600, and zoom in. Let's take a look here. So this actually has more detail. So this is getting at least one stop of detail in comparison to the K3 Mark I. Actually, let's go back one more. So let's go back another stop. So this would be 2-stop difference, 6400 ISO. And let's see here. That looks a bit more even. That looks a bit more even. So yeah, you're getting about two extra stops of capability out of the K3 Mark I regarding detail retention versus noise. Now, I did continue on with the K3 Mark III here. I think it was this one. Let's just take a look here, quick, hurry up. Okay, so this was 204,800. Let me just go back one quickly here. And this is 102,400 ISO. So I'm gonna actually, let's go all the way in here. And this is 50. Let's go all the way to 51,000 and see how this is retaining detail. 51,200. Okay, so we have 51,200 ISO on the K3 Mark I versus 102,400 ISO on the K3 Mark III. Now let's actually take a look at the images side by side here. And there's still more, there's slightly more detail. You know, C is legible, B is barely legible, A is legible. None of these are legible. You know, I mean, it's just splotches everywhere, everywhere. You can still see this screw. Can't see anything here. It's just splotches. It's actually hurting my eyes looking at it. Yeah, let's go over to the white area here. So, yeah, I mean, this is becoming, you know, this is starting to lose its color, whereas this is still maintaining, and you can see yellow splotches, but for the most part, this is still rendering white, right? This orange is still orange, you know? It's still that Godox orangey orange, where this is not as orange at all. And then let's just quickly go over to my multi-tool here. And again, look at the histograms, right? So yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, there is a lot of noise in both of these images. However, the K3 Mark III is maintaining the color, and that's, you know, that's what you want. You want accurate colors, right? So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much, I can't show this any other way. The one thing that, again, I was very, very surprised about was the fact that the DA50 1.8 just would not, it just wasn't sharp. No matter what I attempted, it just was not sharp. And this is at 204,800 ISO. I didn't go any further than this just because it would have had to completely change the exposure, aperture, everything. So this was as far as I pushed it. But I think this is more than enough to show you guys exactly what the image quality differences are between the K3 Mark I and the K3 Mark III. And that's it for me. If you like the video, leave a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It helps me out. If you want to support the channel, I leave that info at the bottom of the description. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And you will see me on my next video. I'm out.